Welcome back to Sunrise Daily. We're still keeping our focus on some of the brewing issues as the polity moves towards the elections. And joining us on Sunrise Daily is Liboros Oshoma. He is indeed a public affairs analyst and also a constitutional lawyer. Thank you so much for joining us. Now, the issue has been largely the amendment of the Electoral Act and whether or not Mr. President will sign it when he returns from Poland, where he is. But what will be the long or short or even medium-term effects if Mr. President, on his return, doesn't sign it?
Thank you for the opportunity. The issues playing out in our polity now are quite unfortunate. I would say that the APC government is is a victim of its own propaganda. And that's why, rather than address the issues, the legal issues, concerning the Electoral Act amendment, what you hear more, it's about sentiment, because our legal issues are being taken over by sentiment. First and foremost, I'll blame the National Assembly. It's not new. It's always been a consistent battle. At the end of one election cycle, begins the cycle of another election year. And so we ought to know that if there are lapses, let's even assume that after the court cases, there are lapses that are identified with the Electoral Act, we ought to start immediately to take steps to amending those lapses, to correcting them. But no, we never do that. We wait until a few months to election. From 2003 election, we had the Electoral Act Amendment 2002. 2007 election, we had amendment 2006. For the 2011 election, we had amendment 2010. And for the 2015, the amendment could not see the light of the day because of the propaganda, sentiment, and all the issues. And so we are almost running into that same, quagmire with the amendment of the Electoral Act 2018, just a few months to the election. The first one was that there were inconsistencies, that section 25 of the Electoral Act was inconsistent with some sections of the Constitution, and so the president refused assent. And so you saw the battle that even led to the stealing of the maize at the National Assembly, with some members supporting the president, even alleging that that section was targeted at the president. And so rather than look at the issues holistically, we reduced it to the president or not the president. And then subsequently that section was expunged, even though the court later ruled that the National Assembly has the right to amend the sequence, but that it is now left for the president or the executive to challenge such amendment after it has become law. You don't wait to, you shouldn't be challenging it even before it becomes law. And then that was expunged. And subsequently, the act was sent for amendment, and some mistakes were noticed. That, if you look at section, I think the section 175, also that subsection 10, that there were conflicts, and that if the president goes ahead to assent to it, it will leave INEC with a 60-day window to conduct, primaries and all of those quagmire. And I had expected that after all of that, what ought to have happened would have been a committee of the National Assembly and the executive to harmonize all the gray areas.
So why is there a delay?
I agree, because the underlays, there are a lot of underlays, because no matter how you look at it, there are issues that some people, because our politics, you can't divorce personal issues from our politics. And so there are issues that some persons feel, look, these are personal to them. And so, but they are cloaked in national, garb to give the impression that it's a national thing. And those are the delays. There are fears also exercised in some quarters that if this amendment is passed the way it is, and so it might be detrimental to some people's personal ambition. And so that's why all of these delays.
What about the PDP? Is largely saying, we heard from Mr. Galadima, who just said and made his submissions that the APC is actually afraid to sign that amendment into law because of the card reader. Does it add up in any way?
You see, that's why I told you, it does not just start and end with the card reader. I had expected that the card reader issue should have been a thing of the past by now. That if you remember, it was the inclusion of the card reader that even led to the transparency we saw in the election in 2015. And so one would have expected that, those that benefited from it, with the lapses noticed, or with the judgment of the Court of Appeal in the Lagos, Akinwumi Ambode and Jimmy Agbaje, and then the Supreme Court, the Notorious Supreme Court judgment, especially in Wike and Dakuku Peter side, not recognizing the fact that on the issue of overvoting, that for you to raise the issue of overvoting, it shouldn't be reckoned against the number of accredited voters by the card reader, but the number of actual registered voters on the register. That also creates a big problem, because if you have accredited voters, 200 accredited voters, accredited by card reader, but actual voters 250, like we saw in the case of Rivers, and ordinarily that would establish overvoting. But what happened? The Supreme Court said no, because the actual register, you still have about 1,000 names on the actual register, and so that there were incidents of manual registration, manual accreditation. And so INEC is trying to curb that issue of manual accreditation, that even where card readers are not functioning, you cannot resort to manual accreditation. And so to that extent, one would have expected that, we take the card reader issue a notch further. So to even give INEC the room to be test running materials, we're budgeting money for equipment, but yet, as we speak now, we're not test running. That is why if you speak to a lot of people about the forthcoming election, they will tell you there are fears entertained from the quarters of INEC and then also from the quarters of the security agencies, if they are going to be fair. And so for people to, be that apprehensive about your national election in a world that is not a global village should be source of concern. But unfortunately, we leave the issues, and this was the same issues that led to the non-amendment of the Electoral Act in 2014. If you remember, Senator Udoma Egbe then, who today is comfortably in APC, he was in PDP then. Also, he was vociferous against the use of card readers on the floor of the Senate, that he was electronic voting. But today, he's comfortably in APC, sins are forgiven, nobody remembers all of those. And we are also playing those sentiments today. And come 2019, if care is not taken, would have taken steps backward, would have also jettisoned the gains made from 2015 election. And then we would be saying, oh, Jega was better than Mahmoud.
Let's just listen to the Senate leader. There was something he was saying about the card reader, but I'm sure our producers can play that video. Let's hear what he had to say about the Electoral Act and why this stalemate, sort of, so to speak.